This is a presentation on the New York City Fire Museum. We are going to explore the history and heritage of firefighting in New York City. The fire department of the City of New York has a long history extending back to the days of Dutch colonization. The New York City Fire Museum tells this story through its collection of objects and photographs. This presentation is geared towards a second grade class, subject social studies. The themes are time, continuity, and change, creation, expansion, and interaction of economic systems. The standards used are Social Studies Standard 1, the history of the United States and New York, and Social Studies Standard 2, economics. After our visit to the New York City Fire Museum, students will understand the history and development of firefighting in New York City from the 1600s through the present. Students will also understand how firefighters provided services to the community throughout history up to and including the present. Lastly, students will understand how people use tools, technologies, and other resources to meet their needs. When the Jamestown settlement was established in Virginia in 1607, it did not take long for America's first colonists to recognize the problem of fire. In January of the following year, raging flames destroyed a good part of the settlement. This forced colonists to come up with a plan for dealing with fires. They started using bucket brigades to help quash flames. When a fire was reported, all available people would form two lines near the flames. Buckets of water would be passed down one line, tossed onto the fire, and then returned the other way to get refilled at the water source. Interestingly, New York citizens were required to fill 3 buckets of water at sunset and place them in front of their doorstep in case an alarm sounded. All citizens were expected to help at fires by forming a part of a bucket brigade. As for fire warnings, early colonists used their voices in addition to rattles, gongs, and other easily crafted noisemakers to spread the word of flames. The Rattle Watch was the first fire alarm system used. It consisted of 8 men who were in charge of patrolling the town at night, carrying wooden rattles that sounded upon the discovery of smoke or fire. At this time, fires were fought using leather buckets, performing bucket brigades, and a Rattle Watch patrol and alarm system. Despite early efforts from colonists, it was not until 1648 that an organized fire corps was developed. In this year, the government of New Amsterdam, now known as New York, created 4 fire warden positions. A law was also created banning wooden chimneys and thatched roofs. These building components were the 2 major fire hazards in early American cities such as Manhattan. It was the duty of the fire wardens to enforce these laws and inspect buildings for other hazards. Those who did not comply with regulations were fined by the city. These were the first steps towards creating an organized firefighting industry. In this early period, the engines were actually horse or man-powered vehicles with hand pumps for helping stream water at the flames. An organized system of people were needed that knew how to operate and maintain these pumpers. The addition of hand pumps and hand-drawn engines led to the formation of volunteer companies. It took a lot of effort to work these devices, and the tubs needed to be frequently refilled. However, they were ultimately far more effective than standard bucket brigades. Bucket brigades were still formed at fires, however, they were used to fill the engine cistern rather than to dump water on the fire itself. New York City was growing beyond its available water supply, so the formation of fire hydrant and hose companies began to form. The invention of the hose led to the demise of water buckets. Men no longer had to drag their apparatus, which were buckets and hand pumpers, to the nearest water source, such as wells and water mains. This decreased firefighters' response times to fires and the need for runners or unofficial firefighters, which were young boys and men who hung around the firehouse waiting for an alarm to sound. Throughout the volunteer era, the organization of the department changed and developed to fit the needs of New York City's growing population. Fighting fires required a lot of manpower, from the initial bucket brigades to the organized volunteer companies. As the city expanded, more efficient means of fighting fires were required. In the early to mid-1800s, hoses were introduced, which led to the demise of fire buckets. Fire apparatus at this time, such as hand pumpers, hook and ladder trunks, and hose reels, were all hand-drawn. The gooseneck engine offered important improvements over the first engines. The nozzle had a swivel connection that allowed water to be aimed without moving the apparatus. Firefighters would grasp the long wood rods called brakes and pump up and down in a seesaw fashion, sending water through the hose and nozzle. Firefighters would get tired easily and had to be replaced by other company members. The city was growing too large for a volunteer department and needed an organized and enforced system put into place, as well as men who could devote more time to fighting fires. Citizens could no longer expect volunteers who had other jobs to provide such laborious duty for free. By using paid departments, New York City was guaranteed a consistent group of individuals available to fight fires. Additionally, career firefighters were held to higher standards of training and efficiency. This meant they were better equipped to perform their duties and less likely to be injured on the job. One of the most important developments in firefighting technology took place around the same time as the switch from urban volunteers to professional forces. Hand-drawn apparatus were replaced by horse-drawn steam engines, which were faster and more efficient at fighting fires than hand-drawn pumpers. Many volunteers did not welcome or trust the new technology. They feared steam engines pulled by horses would require fewer men and would ultimately change what it meant to be a firefighter. To keep up with the demands of a growing city and greater number of people and square mileage to protect, the New York City Fire Department had to adapt new firefighting strategies. Horse-drawn apparatus was replaced by a motorized coal-fired steam engine drawn by a gasoline-powered front-drive tractor. This high-pressure system and motorized apparatus helped firefighters deal with the rising number of fires. Just as the volunteers were slow to give up their hand-drawn pumpers, the paid department was slow to make the transition from horses to the internal combustion engine. This, like many other department changes, was necessary to keep up with the demands of the growing city. During the 1900s, firefighters were able to improve their efforts even more thanks to new technologies. The first major invention was the internal combustion engine. This naturally led to the development of automobiles and subsequently fire trucks. Firefighters also learned to utilize radio communication and special breathing devices like the Drager mask. This made firefighting safer and allowed firefighters to rescue more individuals from a flaming building. In the past and today, firefighters use tools to get through barriers such as locked doors or debris in order to quickly rescue trapped people and fight fire before it spreads. They also use tools to make ventilation holes that allow smoke and heat to escape. Many tools that firefighters use are designed for more than one use, such as the claw tool, Kelly tool, and Halligan tool, amongst others. Today, American firefighting involves a number of individuals with specialized jobs. Aside from traditional firefighters, there are also those who deal with hazardous materials, skyscrapers, and fires on the sea. Additionally, many fire companies have separate ambulatory units to assist injured victims. Both volunteers and paid servicemen participate in all these duties. Modern firefighting also requires greater training and a higher budget for equipment and personnel. Firefighters must be available at all hours of the day, every day of the year. Fires can occur at any time without warning. Firefighters must receive proper training and equipment in order to do their job effectively. Back at the classroom activity. To follow up with what the class has learned at the New York City Fire Museum, students will work in groups of 3 or 4 and compare and contrast how firefighting today is both the same and different from firefighting years ago, and invent an apparatus, a piece of equipment, machinery, or tool that they think would benefit firefighters in the future. Then they are to explain how it would benefit firefighters and the community. And they must be sure to give their invention a name. And these are a listing of the references that I used for this presentation.